right. Welcome to this afternoon's budget hearing. First order of business is to see who's online. So,
Recording in progress.
Commissioner Felicia Franklin.
Present.
Commissioner Gail Hambrick. Commissioner DeMont Davis. Madam Clerk, please let it reflect those who responded. All right, so this evening we will have our budget hearing by our Chief Financial Officer, Ms. Ramona Bivens. Please, ma'am.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. This evening we'll be having our required public hearing for the proposed fiscal year 22 budget. You good to go? Thank you. Is it not on? Hold on, we have some technical difficulties. I'll go back. Okay. Okay, it's working now. Thank you. All right. So, in accordance with state statute, the board is required to adopt an annual budget. Each year we adopt a total budget, although this evening, rather, I'm going to focus on the general fund because that is a fund that is supported by taxpayers' dollars. We operate through 6 funds. Of course, the general operating fund, which is for our day-to-day operating expenses, with a special revenue fund. Those funds, we're required to use those for the stated purpose that the grantor has stated. With the capital projects fund, which includes our SPLOS funds, debt service fund, where we pay any bond or any debt that we have issued, our internal service funds, and then our enterprise funds. First, I want to give a little update on the local economic condition and outlook. Per the economic development information provided to us, approximately 1,065 jobs were created or committed over the last year from Chime Solutions, Fresh Express, Clorox, and then the Atlanta Airport submarket had the fastest industrial growth in our region, and then also the highest amount of industrial space that's under construction or leased during the 3rd and 4th quarter of 2020. Unemployment rate as of April of 2021 is at 6.6. However, at the same time last year, it was up to 16.2%. Due to COVID, we had a lot of businesses shut down because of the pandemic. That 16.2% was at an all-time high over the last 10 years. As you can see on the graph, back in 2010, during the recession, we had a high rate of 13.5, and the trajectory has been downward through 2019. And prior to the pandemic, we were down as low as 4.4%. Again, as I stated, we're at 6.6% as of April, and that's almost at pre-pandemic rates. Some of the revenue challenges, again, we still, as we talked about over the last 2 or 3 years, we had the elimination of the aviation fuel sales tax starting in July of 2019. It's about $6.0 million per year. The state did provide a grant to replace the fund for 3 years. We have included those funds in our budget each year. However, we have not had to use those funds because our revenues have come in, but however, they're not, our sales tax revenues, still not at the rate as they were at the time that we lost the funds. It does have potential direct impact on the property taxes because that sales tax is a variable that is used in calculating our lost credit, which is a reduction to our millage rate to determine our net millage rate. And the county entities continue to collaborate to find other revenue streams from the airport, and hopefully for some potential state legislation for that. Oops. Also, one of the challenges that we had during 2020 and on into this fiscal year is the pandemic, COVID-19. We had a reduction in fees for services because parks and recs were closed. We weren't holding classes. The beach continues to be closed. Fines and forfeitures are down because we're not holding courts to assess as many fines and forfeitures as in the past, even though there are some that they're still doing, but it's not at the level pre-pandemic. And then we've lost some state and federal aid, which impacts some salary reimbursements that we were receiving. So the general fund would have to absorb those costs if we want to maintain those positions. And I didn't put it on there, but overall, from 2019 to 2020, we saw about a $6 million decrease in revenues. This slide shows our property tax digest trends. We received a preliminary digest in April from the tax assessor's office, and this just shows the change in the digest growth from over the last 10 years. And as you can see, we had a decline up through 2017 when we started recovering and had significant increases in the digest of property values. Last year we had 12.42%, this year is 6.59%, a little over $500 million, and maintaining the same millage rate for next year. This is a 5-year history and our current year millage rate that we are proposing to support the proposed budget. As you can see again, the digest grew from last year to this year. Our rollback rate did decrease because of the increase in the property values, and we also had an increase in sales tax from last year. But however, that increase in the property values caused the rollback rate to decrease. We did decrease the gross millage rate, as you can see, from 19.162 to 18.994. After applying that rollback rate, it will allow us to maintain our net millage rate at 15.089. Based on the preliminary digest, that will generate, that will levy $135 million in property taxes that will be levied. So once we levy that, we don't collect all that. We have to account for uncollected because everyone may not pay their property taxes. So as you see on the bottom line, again, you see the gross property tax levy is $135.4 million. The net tax collected is $132 is what we're using in the budget. That is a 97.8% collection rate. We have actually hit that target every year for the past, since I've been here, and actually have exceeded it. But we still want to remain conservative because we never know what might happen to say that, okay, we'll collect 99%. We're going to maintain our 97.5% collection rate. That property tax digest could be impacted by appeals. The assessment notices were sent out for real property on April the 30th. They were mailed. And June 14th is the appeal deadline if citizens want to appeal the values that they received. The personal property notices were sent out on May 7th, and they have until June 21st to appeal those. Well, after that is done, we will receive a lockdown digest to determine our final property values and to confirm if we will generate that amount or not. Any changes in the digest does have an impact on our revenue. If the property values increase, that is a positive effect, and that would generate more tax dollars. And if it's a decrease, that would be a negative effect, and we would have to look at reducing some expenditure somewhere in the proposed budget or increasing the millage rate. The general fund proposed budget is shown here. We are projecting to end the fiscal year with $103 million in our fund balance. We're projecting $226 million in revenues from the property taxes and fees and services and the various other revenues, which I'll show later in the presentation. We're projecting $231.1 million in expenses. That's $5.1 million over or above the revenue that we're projecting to collect. So we would use that amount of fund balance to balance the budget. However, that $5 million is we're using that for some capital items that were requested in the budget. So we're using the fund balance for one-time use, not something that's recurring, which is what's recommended. We should never be using fund balance to fund recurring expenses. So that leaves us with a projected ending fund balance of $97.9 million at June 30th of 2022. The proposed budget includes funds to continue supporting the goals that have been established by the board. I have on here, I have that we're maintaining FY 2020 funding levels for some areas, but in other areas we did make some reductions based on historical spend. So that was our baseline budget. And then we added some things that address the quality of life initiative through merit increases for those employees. that are eligible. We are maintaining the 3 tiers with a maximum of 3.75%, which is equivalent to 3 steps. We're continuing the public safety relocation incentive. There's funding in there for operating expenses for the new facilities that we have brought on board in the last year, and then additional funding for code enforcement to continue addressing the clean initiatives for the county. This slide shows the revenues by source. As I stated earlier, the total amount of the revenues. This is how it's broken down, and as you can see, 57.1% or $132 million of our total budget is from property taxes. The next source of revenues are other taxes and assessments, which is includes our local option sales tax. That's 24%. And then the next one is charges for services, which comes from our Parks and Rec senior services, those fees that are being paid for the classes that are done by those areas. And then you can see the rest there, with the lowest one being intergovernmental revenue. This shows the expenditures by type. So of the $231 million that we're projecting, $150 million of it is in personnel services. That's 65% of our budget. That is common with other industries, or with all industries, where up to 69 to 70% of budget is, or expenses, are in personnel costs. Our regular operating expenses at $73 million, and then capital outlay is at 3.8, and that's just in the general fund. What's not included in our total budget once we get to the end would be the SPOS, because we budget that as a project, and the system automatically rolls it over every year, so it's not going to be included in the total amounts here. Then we have some debt service, and then other financing uses, and that's where we have to match grants that we receive or transfer funds to other funds in the county. This shows it by category. A lot of times people say, well, what are we spending on the courts and law enforcement, which is the Sheriff's Office of Public Safety? This slide shows that. The majority of our funds is going towards courts and law enforcement, 34.9% at $80.6 million. 27.4 is for all the other departments in general government at $63.4 million. Public safety is the next largest chunk of the expenses, followed by the rest you can see in Parks and Rec, the transportation development, health and welfare, libraries, and that operating transfer. Now again, that's for any of the grants that we have to match. That's in that area. So just as a recap, we're proposing revenues of $226 million, expenses of $231.1 million, using $5.1 million of fund balance for our one-time capital expenditures that were requested by the departments, and ending next year with an estimated $97.9 million in fund balance. As I stated earlier, we have to adopt a total budget when we adopt for all funds. So of all the funds I listed, this shows the amounts that we're proposing for each one of those funds, and as you can see, the general fund is 65.8%. It's the largest of all the funds. It's followed by the pension trust fund at $45.5 million, special revenue fund at $43.9 million, internal service funds, and the enterprise funds. So we're requesting to adopt or proposing a $350.9 million budget. And also for the general fund budget, our budget is actually about $9 million less than the current year's amended budget, and that is due to the CARES money that we received last year. Not the new money, but the CARES money, because we had to amend that in. So that money is no longer, we'll no longer have that money in next year's budget. So when you look at the history in the budget document that I gave you, you'll see where the expenses and the revenue decreased by that amount. Excuse me. Right now, our current average monthly expenditure is about $17 million. Good practice is that we have a minimum of 1 month's operating expense in reserve. Of course, we have far beyond that. And again, we're projecting in the current fiscal year with $103 million in fund balance. If we want to add some additional items to this proposed budget, we would need to look at either finding some additional revenue through growth in the digest or millage rate increase, as I stated earlier, once we get the final digest. If it has an increase in property values, then that would generate some more money to use for additional revenue, or we could increase the millage rate to generate additional revenue. Another option is to reallocate some of the items in the budget, to remove those and reallocate those funds to the new items, or use of reserves, which I don't recommend again, which is not best practice to use for recurring expenditures. But if there are some one-time expenses that we can take care of, we could use fund balance for that one-time infusion of funds. This is just a calendar recap, a recap of our budget. The budget book was published on May 25th. Today, of course, is our public hearing. The budget adoption is scheduled for June 15th during the regular board meeting. And then millage rate hearings and millage rate adoptions, those dates will be determined based on the final digest that we receive. That's all I have. I ran through that kind of fast. I'm open to any questions.
All right, well, I can tell you put a lot of work into that, you and your staff, and I appreciate, as we do every year, coming up with a good sound fiscal budget. Any questions from any board member?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Franklin.
Yes. First of all, thank you, Alana, for that presentation. Question for you, and maybe I missed it, two questions. Break down the fund balance to begin with for me. What was the beginning fund balance once again, prior to what you're projecting it to be?
Hold on just a moment. Look in my book. I want to say about 105 million because we're projecting to use about $2 million of it for this fiscal year.
Okay.
So
What was the fund balance to prior year?
Hold on just a moment. Last year we ended with 106,793 for 20.
Okay. And how much of that fund balance was still left over from the funding we got from the state? Is there anything in there? What was that amount?
Yes, we received $18 million from the state, and we have not had to use that money. It is still in our fund balance.
Okay. So in a normal, let me make sure I understand this, because you keep making a statement about you don't suggest that we use the funding, but that $18 million that was provided to us was provided to us in lieu of the amount of sales taxes that we would have received if we received jet fuel, correct? The jet fuel tax, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so what would those sales taxes, that funding would have been used on in a normal situation?
It was to
And
us.
for what period of time?
So if for each one of those years, the money was there if we needed it for our operating costs in both of those years, in all 3 years.
Let me go back to what I asked. Not if we need it for operating costs, but we, basically, that was from SPLOST. We got that in lieu of SPLOST. So what would those funds have been used on? Because when we are collecting funds for SPLOST purposes, they have their expiration date. So what would those funds normally would have been used for? Not what we're doing now, but what would they have been used for?
Commissioner, those funds were not to replace SPLOST. That was for our local option sales tax, not for the special purpose local option sales tax, which is for our capital items. The local option sales tax is supports our day-to-day operating expenses, and that's
Okay,
why
so
they gave us the funding.
Okay, so, and that was to take us to what year?
It was for 2019, 2020, and this year, 2021.
Okay, so technically, 2019, 2020, and 2021, $18 million would have been used for operations, correct? That, because we would have collected and used it, correct?
Yes.
Okay, for the loss. But it's still sitting in our reserve at this time.
That is correct.
Okay, all right, that's the first thing I wanted to ask. The second thing is, I noticed that the merit increases was listed there. I know that our board previously did a study on salaries, and I'm understanding that we've already established that we've got $18 million that normally would have gone towards operations in 2019, 2020, and 2021. Then is there a particular reason that we have not looked at executing Part B of that salary study so that we can take care of those folks who actually take care of the day-to-day operations of our county? We instituted the change. We increased people's salaries, the COOs. We did the COO, the CFO. We increased director salaries on a regular basis. So again, understanding that we've got funds there, is there a particular reason that we are not looking at instituting Part B, as we told our employees we would do, considering that our financial stability was there? Is there any reason we're not entertaining that?
Commissioner, before I did fail to mention, part of the items that are included in the budget is Part 2 of the MAG study, Option A, at $700 and something thousand that I did fail to mention. That is included in the budget already. Now, as far as using those funds to fund salaries, you have to look into the future when probably I'm long gone and some of us are not still here. Someone would have to make sure that we have the funding to maintain and sustain those salaries. That's why we don't recommend using fund balance, even though we did get those monies for the operating expenses at that time. It's not a good idea to use fund balance to fund salary increases because you have to sustain those in future years.
Okay, I don't know if you're listening to what you're saying.
Yes, ma'am, I am listening. I heard what you said.
Okay, the point is, we established that 2019, 2020, 21, 21, monies initially would have been collected from sales tax, whether it was SPOS, local option sales tax, but it was collected and it would have been used towards operations, but we chose not to. So we have it in a fund balance as opposed to using it towards, and I hear you clearly about the future, but at the end of the day, bottom line is that money was designated for that. What I'd like to do is a deep dive into the 709,000, and I want to see exactly what the percentages are and how we're taking care of our folks. Another thing I do want to bring up, and I know that we received emails on it, is dealing with not only our salaries, but again, taking care of our employees. And looking at our benefits and knowing that the costs are rising everywhere for everything. When we're looking at what the salaries are and the benefits are in other areas, I would really like for our board, once again, because we've established that there's 18 million that normally would have gone towards operations, which would still leave us with a very healthy fund balance, as you suggested, that we look at covering a little bit more for our employees, especially on life insurance. We just lost a officer, and you know, I'm here serving as a commissioner now, but that's one of the things I will always take a look at when I was the benefits consultant. But we've not reviewed the life insurance for our officers or anyone else in several years. They're getting $25,000 worth of life insurance, when in a lot of jurisdictions, and even the smaller jurisdictions, which have a less revenues, they're getting at least 1 times their annual salary. So I think that it would benefit our board to take a look at, once again, taking care of the folks who are helping us with our everyday operations. The other thing is, another question, and I think I asked this in your last budget presentation. You have an item that shows the total amount of revenue of property taxes. What is that percentage breakdown from the homeowners versus the business owners? Because that's important for us to look at. Do you have that information versus residential versus commercial?
I don't have that information with me. I do have it over here on my computer. I'll be happy to send it to you again. I did send that to the commissioners last year when that information was requested. But again, I'll be happy to send it again.
Okay, and I would like to request that that be included, because as we state our goals, the main goal is that Clayton County to no longer operate off the backs of just our residents. We are a huge vet-run community, and we know that the community has been asking for more commercial property. So it's great to hear about the jobs created, but I want to know specifically what is the median income of those jobs that were created, and then also where are we collecting our taxes, whether residential or commercial, because that will help us protect our future as well. Another point, in looking at the book that you provided to us, I'm looking at it, and there are some positions that I'd like to do a deeper dive on. The first thing is, we have a 8 denoted towards several of our top tier folks that are paid. I would personally like to see that the amounts divulged to the public, not just in the book, because that gives us a clear understanding of how much we are spending in each one of those departments. And then also, we want to do a deeper dive into some of the positions that I'm noticing here. And I know that you all wanted to meet with us individually, but for me, I really want to see this presented in a public forum so that it goes to another level of transparency and understanding for our community as we continue to move forward collectively and making sure that Clayton County is a great place to live, work, and play. And I think that's all I got for now. I'll continue studying, and I look forward to your follow-up on the residential versus commercial, and then the deeper dive into the employee salaries, and then also into making sure that we look at providing more life insurance and at least hoping to take some of the burden off of our folks as we move forward. Oh, one other question. We talked about the fees from other jurisdictions. Now, we know that with our jail and our medical examiner services, that we are incurring those fees from cities as well as the county. Have we addressed the, if we're receiving enough to be able to help balance out the responsibility, the financial responsibility of those that are in unincorporated Clayton versus those that are in incorporated Clayton or in incorporated Clayton? Have we looked at that?
Commissioner, I'm not clear on what your question is. You said the fees that we're receiving from other jurisdictions?
Correct.
For what services?
Particularly our jail services and our medical examiner services. Our medical examiner services, we realized the GBI stopped providing that to us, and we're working on, in which we have implemented a means to provide those services from the county standpoint. But as it was brought to my attention during my research at that time, those medical examiner services are provided to all of our local jurisdictions, all of our cities, our 7 cities, including our jail services. So has the finance department reviewed the cost generated versus the fees, if we're receiving any fees from our local jurisdictions to help cover those costs within our county budget?
So I don't think that we're receiving fees directly from them. It is my understanding that we have a service delivery agreement that provides services to those cities, and it's covered through that.
That is correct.
Can we get that amount, please, and again, so we can review it, if we don't mind?
You want the amount, the service delivery agreement amounts, or the amount for the medical examiner?
For both, all of those. We have to do it in a comprehensive manner. What we need to do is look at our jail services fees, medical examiner costs, jail service costs, medical examiner services costs, and then we also want to look at what we're receiving within the intergovernmental agreement, and is it covering those? I know that we looked at it for 911, but I think all of those items need to be analyzed so that we can make sure that unincorporated Clayton County is not shouldering the burden or increasing cost without making sure that the financial responsibility is equalized among those generating those said costs.
Well, let me just say this also. We have to be mindful that if it is in the service delivery agreement, then for those services that's provided to the cities from the county, then that can only be renegotiated through the next, which is when? When do we renegotiate the service delivery?
2022, I believe.
2022? Yeah. So I understand what you're saying about the breakdown, but I just want to make sure that you are aware that as long as that is covered under the SDS, then we'll have to wait to recalculate whatever percentage.
Yeah, but that's why I was going to say, Mr. Chairman, that when we do address that in the new service delivery agreement, we will look at those services where we've had escalation in cost and make sure that they are included as part of that negotiations in that agreement.
That's correct.
Awesome. So that so let's make a note for the ME services in the jail. That would be great. Thank you so much.
All right, Commissioner Davis, you have anything?
I forgot what my question was. No. Thank you. Great job, Ms. Bivens.
Thank you.
Right. Okay, so as long as y'all made notation of those requests by Commissioner Franklin, Are there any other announcements or,
I think you need to open the floor for public comments.
oh, public comment?
Yes.
Okay, all right. At this time, we will entertain public comment. This is a public hearing, so if anybody would like to come up and speak on the matter of the fiscal budget, proposed budget, then please come forward and do so.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Do I have to give my name and all that good stuff?
Yes, ma'am.
Tanya Jean Funny, unincorporated Clayton. So I took the time to go through the 300-plus pages of the budget, and I really want to thank all the people that was responsible for putting it together, because that was a lot of information there. I do have a few questions. So when I look at our statistics, the average age for our Clayton County residents is around 32, 33 years old, which means that our population is pretty young. And we all know it's approximately like 50% single families, single homes. And I work with a lot of the single parents during the pandemic, having a pandemic pod for students and things like that. And one of the things that I'm realizing is that I would really like to see a more robust attention paid to our youth, because it's like when I look at the budget, I'm just seeing a lot of law enforcement things, you know, and we all know that we can't over-police our community. We have to invest in our young people now so that they have these options later on in life. And so like I saw Tasha Mosley's office, she has an initiative to combat that, but there's no money in her, that's like her first objective that she has on her list, but there's no money put toward that particular project, which, you know, and I've seen the booklets that she sends to the schools and different things like that, but it's like without a organized program around it, how effective is that going to be for our students? As we all know, we have over 50,000 students in Clayton County, and that's just in our school district. That doesn't even count the ones that may be homeschool, private, things like that. And I just would really like to see more put toward that. Our prices for recreation is on the same level as Henry and Fayette County, but our salaries do not match that. So when you tell parents, oh, put your child in soccer for $120, and then if they have more than one child, I'm finding that that's very expensive for our families. I just don't see the programs coinciding with the incomes that we have here. And I've talked before about subsidized rec services. I've seen where partnerships with businesses work with the rec centers to bring those prices down so we can have more of our youth participate in those programs. I've seen where if a parent or community member volunteers to coach, or like right now I'm a tennis mom, I'm missing tennis right now, volunteer, that those families either get a reduced amount that they pay for their kids or even have it be free. And then you have volunteers, you have students participating, you have more community support. I just think that when we look at our budget, we gotta analyze like what is our population and make sure that we are catering to what we have so that we can grow it. And it's not all about just bringing in a warehouse or something like that, that, you know, we gotta think about, well, what happens when those parents go to work? What are their kids doing? What do we have for them to do? And another issue that I have is, I feel like if I go on community development website, I should be able to log in and say, I want a florist. Let me see, where are the florists in Clayton County? And I should be able to go to community development, do a search, and all the florists for Clayton County should pop up. And then I can patronize a business in our county. instead of just going to Google, which is gonna show me everything all over Atlanta. So I saw in the budget that we are increasing the number of people for IT. So I'm hoping that this is one of the things that we can work on with community development, because I really want to work, live, play in Clayton County. And I don't want to have to go somewhere else unless I want to go somewhere else, but I shouldn't be where I have to go somewhere else to do these things. And one of the things that Commissioner Franklin brought up was that I wanted also, and we haven't talked about it, but I also wanted to see the separation between business and property, because I couldn't find that anywhere. Also, when we look at our projects, as far as roads, sidewalks, things like that, there's a amount of money that has been allocated for that. But how do we go about, because I tried to get lighting on Panhandle Road. How do we go about to find out where these projects are taking place? What is the system that we use for, okay, this community, we need to focus on paving these roads. This is where we need sidewalks. I'm sure you all have it, but I couldn't find it. So if we could see as residents exactly where the projects are going to take place, so we can just know that something is coming to our neighborhood. Is it all in one neighborhood? How exactly do we make that decision about what is going to be the next project? So those are some of the things that I came up with. And I think the last one is about our health care. I know you all have a partnership. I saw something on there about Southern Regional buying property or doing something. And I just wanted to know, is any of that going to be used for pediatric care, pediatric ER? We do not have anything. We have one CHOA in Henry County that serves about 5 counties. And so if you have a young child, and y'all are beyond this, but I'm in the thick of it. If you have a young child, you are sitting there in that CHOA for hours. And Chairman, we talked about this, I think about 2 or 3 years ago, that the CHOA that was over in Mount Zion closed a long time ago. So if we're gonna work with Southern Regional, I think that would be a way to bring in even some other counties to have emergency room pediatric care. Because when a child has an allergic reaction or something like that, they cannot sit in a waiting room with adults for treatment. If their throat closes, it's very hard to open it back up. So these are some suggestions that I've seen in my observations that I'm hoping that we can work on for Clayton County.
Well, I appreciate your comments, but let me say this in reference to the road projects and so forth. You've been to T&D's Transportation and Development's website.
No.
I think they might have some, I'm pretty sure they have some information, especially as to how you get additional information on the website. Reference to community
You
development.
said T&D?
Yeah, T&D, Transportation and Development.
Okay. But I'm saying,
Mr.
like,
Rowland.
in our budget, you can't just show a list of the upcoming projects that are,
Ms.
oh,
Business.
you can tell me what page it's on.
Well, actually, it's not in the budget. It's actually, the county is required to do an annual SPOS report. And I believe that either the COO's office or another office in the county, they have a monthly report or update that's sent out. I just saw an email either yesterday or today that came out with the SPOS update. So it has all the SPOS projects on there. Now, I'm not sure if it's a specific road that's shown on there, but it does show that we have road projects on there. So, if you go to the county's website, it's usually on the front page. It has SPOS update. Give me a call tomorrow and I can direct you to exactly where it is, or send me an email.
And I do believe it's a
It doesn't have to be
video
detailed.
presentation.
Say that again?
I believe there's a video presentation as well.
So, I mean, I know, like, a lot of times we stand up here and we're given, like, specific information, but I want to hope that I'm not just standing up here for the funny family. I'm hoping I'm standing up here for the residents of Clayton County. So it's like, if we can make it clear, like if somebody goes to the county website where they can find, and it says, you know, upcoming, so, because I know like somebody else is watching this and they're saying, oh, that's a good idea. Well, where can I go? I don't want to get a personal email. I just want our residents to be able to find this information. So thank you, Ms. Vivens, for that SPLOS update. And so we all know like where it is and what's upcoming, you know, things like that.
And let me say in reference, go ahead, Commissioner Franklin.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, go
Ms.
ahead.
Bonnie, I always enjoy your passion and I enjoy the fact that you read. That is huge because that's how we're going to move our county forward. You continue to make me proud that we are parents raising our children here in Clayton County. So I'm there in the thick of things with you. First of all, with pediatric care, I agree with you. Well, that's one of the things we're going to have to keep pushing forward with working with the hospital because you have to keep in mind our hospital is now a private hospital. And so I do want to make sure that you stay connected with some of the doctors that are actually working out of that hospital who have been working towards getting that change. And that's an issue all the way around. So I hear you on that. Secondly, on the roads, I do want to tell you, you were exactly right. I heard the answer that was provided to you, and we do add the SPLOS updates in my e-blast I send out to you. But other than specifically through the GDOT, there are some projects that are included in there, but the specificity, if I can say it, in which you are asking, I've not been able to locate that anywhere. Even as a commissioner, I had to deal with a road about a year ago that had so many craters in it that was tearing up cars, and I was told it was going to be $300,000 just to move one project up on the list and move another one that didn't need as much repair. And it's interesting because I got complaints from the residents saying our roads are fine. Why are you redoing them? But we redo some roads, but then the others that are in dire need, it's kind of difficult to be able to work through that. But we're going to continue to work through that. And I promise you, as your commissioner, I'll continue to work through that. The other question you had on DA Mosley, even though the amount's not shown there, in my research, it is known that DA Mosley actually has a forfeiture fund, and that's where those funds are used. So she does have funds that are used for that. It may not show allocated in here, but those are funds that she uses as well as she's along with, I think, PD and the Sheriff's Office, and those funds are specific in how they could be used because they're federal funds. So I don't want you to think that that's not being funded. Your question about the sports rates, you are dead on the money. You heard me mention earlier about the $18 million that's sitting in our fund balance. I do agree that we got to continue with the healthy fund balance. I totally agree with that. But when we're looking at making sure that we provide services to our youth, I think that there should definitely be a process in which our students that we know that are need-based students can be able to receive those services. And that's specifically why I did not take no for an answer. We kept pushing for the Boys and Girls Club over in Flint River because that opens the doors for philanthropy outside of operations without me having to beg for that support. And then finally on community development, I hear you clearly, but I do want to urge you to please visit the Chamber of Commerce. I don't know, it's a great idea, but I have not seen where a jurisdiction offers that level of service. Generally with the county, it's the Chamber of Commerce that works hand in hand with community development that has a landing page on the website so that you can still be provided the level of service that you're requesting, but I guess the responsibility lands and stays with the Chamber of Commerce, but it could be seamless through our process and online. And then finally, don't forget now, school system gets 62% of our sales taxes. So we got to definitely make sure that we keep that in mind as we're serving our youth, but I'm right there with you. I am there with you. Thank you for your comments. Your comments are spot on. Thank you for being an informed citizen.
And let me just add, Ms. Funny, that we have developed a One Clayton website that connects businesses with citizens. So exactly what you're requesting. And I think we worked with the chamber on that as well, correct?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And also when it comes to Southern Regional and your request about pediatric care and so forth, We're working on a medical overlay district
Awesome.
that could, and that whole Upper Riverdale Road, Arrowhead Shopping Center, as well as the Boulevard area. So we hear you, and we are working towards those ends. Just takes a little time to try to get it done, but we are committed to making sure those things happen.
I appreciate that, because that would be like, bring people from other places,
Absolutely.
which I think is awesome. And I promise you that Commissioner Felicia and I did not speak about this, but I hope that you all have sat down and done the regulations so that drumline can come to the rec center, which is a free service for the students. So, because I think that would be awesome. So I don't know if it's on the agenda for tonight.
It's not. And we
It's
have,
okay. It's okay, you know, we did. I agree.
and we have a SPLOS site, a website, ClaytonSPLOS.com.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am.
on the website, I went to it through the county's website, but on there on the drop down, you can click on projects, and there's categories of projects. So when I clicked on the transportation projects, there's a list of completed projects with the names of the actual streets, and then further down, it has active projects on there. Now, it doesn't show anything that's planned, but it does show active and the completed projects.
Okay, I guess I'm just a little spoiled because with the Board of Ed, the SPLOS projects are under the SPLOS on the budget, so we can see it a little more clearly.
Well, if you go specifically to that site,
But,
I believe that'll
that
be
works.
outlined.
I appreciate you all so much. I appreciate you listening to me, and just know, like, everything I say, you know, Mr. Funny and I have been talking about it, because we really, really just want to see Clayton County come up to where we know, like, when we moved here, we're like, Clayton County is a gem, and other people need to know. But then, you know, we start working with the community, and we're getting phone calls, like, we, you know, can do something, and you know, just different things, and we just know that we need all our voices to be heard, and then we start working on things, and then together we come and we can really make this county what it needs to be for our residents. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else like to speak on the budget? All right, here and now, we stand adjourned.